Hey y'all! Thought we'd pop in today to talk about one of my favorite fiber crafts, cross stitch. This is going to be a nice sit-down chat about the tools and supplies you'll want to have on hand, especially if you're new to the craft. We'll cover what you absolutely need to get started, some really helpful extras that can make stitching easier and more fun, and then a few optional luxuries that you might want to treat yourself to down the road. Whether you've been curious about cross-stitch for years, or you just love exploring new fiber hobbies alongside your knitting and crochet, this guide will give you a clear picture of what belongs in your starter kit. Now let's start with the basics. The things you truly need to begin cross-stitching. The very first thing is fabric. The most common choice, and the one that I recommend for beginners, is called Aida cloth. Look up close there. This has a distinct grid-like structure that makes it very easy to see where your needle should go. It comes in different counts, such as 14 count, 16 count, or 18 count. This is 14. What does that count mean? Well, that number refers to how many stitches fit in an inch. The higher the number, the smaller and more delicate your stitches will be. 14 count Aida cloth is the classic beginner option because it's big enough to see clearly without magnification, but still looks tidy when stitched. Once you feel confident, you can branch out into fabrics like even weave or linen, which offer a much finer, more sophisticated look. Or you can stick with Aida cloth. A lot of cross stitchers stick with Aida cloth forever because it's easy to use and very versatile. Next up, you need your embroidery floss. That's what this is. This is special thread designed for cross stitch. The most widely available brands are DMC, Anchor, and Cosmo, and they come in these skeins of 6-stranded cotton. So when you pick these out, each strand is made of actually 6 little threads. Okay? The fun thing about floss is that you separate those threads. Okay, you take away your embroidery floss, you take that one piece of floss and you break it down into separate threads. A lot of patterns will actually tell you how many strands you want to use. Each one has 6 strands. So sometimes you'll use 2 for standard stitching, 3, maybe 4, sometimes 6. More or less depending on the effect you're hoping to create. Most patterns will either be an 11 count, which uses 3 strands, or a 14 count that uses 2 strands. So you check your pattern, what is it meant for, and adding more strands creates a thicker, obviously, thicker floss. So keeping your floss neat is a whole adventure in and of itself. We'll circle back to that at a much later date. I'll talk about how to keep your threads organized because it can be a little bit overwhelming. So we'll move past that for now. Now, of course, you can't stitch without a needle. You'll want tapestry needles or cross-stitch needles, and you'll want a lot of them. Okay, so I have my needles kept in a little container here. Okay, and I've got quite a few. Now, the reason you want tapestry needles and not standard needles is because you want them to have a blunt tip and a wider eye. The eye of the needle is larger to allow more more threads to pass through. Okay, that's really important. If you're using a standard sewing needle, that eye is so small you might not be able to get your 2 or 3 strands through there. So that's one of the reasons we like to use tapestry needles. And the bluntness keeps you from accidentally splitting the threads in your fabric because you're going through the same hole multiple times to do crosses in different directions. So you want to make sure that your needles aren't going to completely destroy your threads. Okay? So for Aida cloth, however you want to say it, I don't care. But a size 24 or 26 needle works perfectly. If you're using finer fabrics and fewer strands of floss, size 28 might be your best bet. It's always handy to have a few different sizes on hand because we all know how easily needles like to disappear into couch cushions. Do any of us actually cross stitch at the table where we could find a drop needle? No. We all sit on the couch all cozy with our blankets, and needles end up in weird spots. It's just the way it is. You're also going to want a good pair of scissors. Now, embroidery scissors, which is what these are small. Okay, they're small. They are sharp. They are precise, perfect for snipping threads right up against your fabrics without fraying them and making a mess. While you technically could use regular household scissors, I really don't recommend it. Once you try a proper pair of embroidery scissors, you will absolutely notice the difference. And you absolutely should get yourself a pair. Make sure they're called embroidery scissors or cross-stitch scissors, or maybe they came in your cross-stitch kit. That's usually what you want to use. Now, another essential is something to hold your fabric tight while you work. These are not technically essential, but I think they are. Okay, the simplest option is an embroidery hoop, which comes in different sizes and materials. These are wood, but you can also get them in plastic or metal. Now, a hoop keeps the fabric taut, so your stitches stay even and your fabric stays exactly where you want it to stay. Some people like Q-snaps or scroll frames, which I'll get into much later, but for a beginner, a hoop is probably what you're looking for. They're affordable, they're easy to find, and they get the job done. It doesn't matter what material your hoop is made of. I have heard people talk about how the only valid hoop is a wooden one. You can use the cheap plastic ones from the dollar store. It does not matter. Okay, as long as you have something that will hold your fabric taut. So you can see here, the fabric ends up basically sandwiched between those two rings. That just keeps your fabric from being all over the place. Can you technically do this without some kind of hoop? Yeah, technically, it's easier to do it with a hoop. Okay? Finally, you'll need some kind of pattern. This can be something that you purchase, like a digital download. It can be from a chart or a book. It can be a free design from the internet. It can be a pattern that you purchased, like so. This is the one I'm currently working on. It's beautiful. It's going to be great. Going to look good hanging on the wall. Patterns can range from small, simple motifs like hearts, stars, or letters, all the way to massive, full coverage pieces that take months or even years to complete. Wherever you start, the pattern will guide you through your project and show you exactly which colors go where. Can you create your own patterns? Sure. But always start with something, right? If you're designing your own pattern, get some graph paper and draw it out. But make sure you have somewhere to start. This would be very difficult to eyeball. So get yourself a picture. There are even websites now where you can take a picture of your own and change it into a cross-stitch pattern. I really recommend doing that. It's really quick, it's simple. You'll be able to stitch and make a very beautiful piece just by putting your photo into a website. It's really easy. I really recommend that. So those are our must-haves. So now let's look at some helpful things that aren't essential but are also really helpful while you start stitching. First of all, needle threaders. I have so many needle threaders. Okay, see that little gap there? These are so important. If you've ever struggled to get embroidery floss through your needles, you need a needle threader, okay? You need one. You'll appreciate this. Needle threaders come in a couple of different styles. Some are just like what I showed you, a little loop of wire set into a flat piece of metal or plastic. Others are a little bit sturdier, shaped like tiny paddles that last longer. These things save you time and frustration, especially when you're working with multiple strands of floss. Another big helper is a way to organize your floss. Floss tends to tangle, okay, especially when you're working with multiple different pieces of floss, multiple different colors, multiple strands. So this is a really helpful thing. Floss bobbins, okay? They are a common solution. This is just something, this is what this is, floss bobbin. These are just something you can wind the thread around when you're not using it. So if you drop one color and want to pick up another, but you don't want to tie it off, wrap the excess thread around your bobbin. Keeps it out of the way. Okay? There are also ring systems and specialty organizers if you want something fancier. Staying organized from the beginning will save you from hours of untangling. You don't want 30 strings hanging at the back. Okay? I get wanting to drop and pick up colors. I do that all the time. But make sure you are keeping those things contained. Now, tracking your progress. Many stitchers like to keep a highlighter or a washable pen handy so they can mark off sections of the pattern as they complete them. You can absolutely do that. So I could scratch off the parts of the pattern I have completed. That is not necessary, but it does keep you from losing your place, especially with large or complicated designs. If you want to go one step further, you can use a water-soluble fabric pen to grid your fabric before you begin. That means drawing grid lines and washing them off later. Don't worry, the ink washes out. That's why it's water-soluble. You can also get magnetic boards and magnets to hold your paper pattern in place, and you can keep track of where you are that way. I don't tend to do that. I tend to just keep track by eye, but if you need a tracking system, that's fine. Then there's lighting. You do want good lighting. If you do not have a place to sit while you have good lighting, you want a really good lamp or a clip-on lamp, maybe even with a magnifier if you're working with small stitches. That will help you. Finally, needle minders. I don't have needle minders anymore, but I used to. These are small decorative magnets that sit on your fabric and hold your needle while you're not using it. It might sound silly, but once you've dropped your needle onto the carpet a few times, you'll like them. I tend to just stick them into my blanket or the side of the couch, which I shouldn't do, but I do it anyway. And, of course, a project bag or a storage box or something like that, just so that you can have somewhere to keep all your stuff. Okay, I have a little bag. I have a little bag that I can drag around, right? Just has a bunch of pouches to put all my stuff. I've had it for years. I think you can still buy that exact same bag. Find a bag or a box you can store your stuff in so it's not all over the counter all of the time. Okay? There are a couple of optional things you can get. You can, instead of getting hoops, you can get Q frames or scroll frames, things like these to give you more tension. They're expensive, but if that's what you want, if you'd rather have a scroll frame rather than a hoop, yeah, I would get some practice under your belt first. Don't invest until you're sure you love doing this. You also might want to do specialty threads and beads because you can add beading to your work if you like. Once you get a little experience under your belt, try adding some beads. And you just do that by putting the bead on your thread exactly where you want that bead to appear. Ta-da! Done! You can also, if you are going to get really fancy, get all your beads and get a floor stand, and some of the floor stands come with places to put all your beads and stuff. That's really cool. You also might want to get fabric stabilizers. These can be useful if you want to stitch on soft or unusual materials like t-shirts or tote bags. It gives a little more structure. Finally, travel-friendly gadgets. If you like to stitch on the go, think collapsible scissors, think mini clip-on lights, magnifiers, things that are small and easy to keep in your bag if you do like to stitch on the go. So you will build your own set of stuff over the years. But the truth is you don't need every tool under the sun to cross-stitch. If you've got some fabric, some floss, some needles, a needle threader, and a good pair of scissors, and one single hoop, you can do it. Okay? Your stitching kit will grow naturally with your experience and your projects, and you'll figure out which tools actually make a difference for your style. Well, y'all, that's about it. I'd love to hear in the comments what your must-have tools are for cross-stitch. Do you keep it simple with just fabric, floss, and a hoop? Or do you have a favorite luxury item that makes your stitching life easier? Share your tips and favorites down below so we can all learn from each other. Happy stitching!